Well, this is for my patrons, obviously, on the Patreon channel. Get myself comfortable in the office here, in my little office in Birmingham. And we're going to be talking a little bit about NLP and essentially what's essentially called the 4 foundations of NLP. What do I mean by the 4 foundations? Well, let's do a little bit of history on NLP first and foremost. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with this microphone attachment, which I'm getting used to, obviously. Yeah, so NLP. What is NLP? Okay, strictly speaking, NLP is the study and the ability to use what we have in subjective experience. All of our experiences in the world are subjective, based on what we have been conditioned to believe or identify with or behave in. NLP, bluntly put, is simply an acronym for neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro to do with the mind, linguistic to do with language, both verbal and non-verbal. And programming is, well, it's pretty obvious what programming is. You're reprogramming the brain to change perceptions, and that's what it's all about, essentially. Created by Richard Bandler and John Grinder back in the 70s, basing a lot of their work on that of Korzybski and quite a few other people, and I'll put those names on a separate document. In fact, they should be in the manual. If you look on the Patreon channel for published works and manuals, you look for NLP manual and you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a list of names of people, many of whom are on my bookshelves here. People that will give you some sort of guidance. So Bandler and Grinder created a systemized quite a lot of the work of these people. One of the most influential people was, of course, Milton Erickson, the famous hypnotherapist from the 50s. Erickson was outstanding in his field, and Bandler and Grinder decided to model what he did, how he achieved the success. And from that small seed, that idea of modeling successful people, Bandler and Grinder went on to model lots of other people. Scientists, writers, artists, therapists, lots of therapists, some great therapists that they worked with, family therapists in particular. And again, we'll go into that in more detail. This is not intended to be a history lesson per se. It was more by just giving an introduction to the background to where NLP came from. I trained with Richard Bandler and found him a larger-than-life character, an incredible academic with an amazing mind, but also a very good communicator. And that's what NLP is about. It's about communication, effective communication through the use of verbal and non-verbal language. Over the next few weeks of these Patreon channel postings, I'm going to take you through each of those stages. And let's come back to the 4 foundations. It's essentially the legs that support what is NLP. Remember, NLP is an attitude rather than an actual thing. NLP is growing continuously. It's simply a name that Bandler had to give to something so people could access it, could hook it on. So remember that it's just a label. NLP is more, it's an attitude of curiosity that leaves behind it a whole trail of techniques. Okay, it's this curiosity that fuels the study of NLP. And if you're one of those people who likes to think, likes to get involved, and actually likes to do things, NLP is for you. There are many people out there teaching NLP purely as a theoretical model. That was never Richard Bandler's intention. His intention was to go out and to use it to help people, to model excellence in behaviours and then give those behaviours to individuals. And over the next few weeks, I'm going to get you to do some exercises, either with or without a partner. Better with a partner if you can have somebody to practice on. These techniques will develop you as a person and help you understand NLP, and you'll start to create. You'll actually start to create your own little techniques. So remember that it's an attitude of curiosity first and foremost. So you have to keep that attitude of curiosity throughout this course. Okay, 4 foundations. Let's go back to those. The first one is rapport. Building rapport and empathy is absolutely key to any effective form of communication. End of. You don't create rapport, you don't gain trust, you don't get the confidence of the person or group of people you're working with, therefore you don't achieve your outcome. Outcomes are one of the foundations. Let's come back to that in a moment. So rapport, how do we build rapport? We're going to look at that in detail. Then of course you have behavioral flexibility. You must have flexibility in your behavior in order to create flexibility in another person or a group of people's behavior. Okay, so behavioral flexibility is key. So in a nutshell, if something's not working, do something else. You'll find that there's people who fail at things because they repeat the same thing over and over and over again. If it ain't working, okay, do something else. Just as they say, if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. It's fine. Okay, so that again is a fundamental leg support to the whole of NLP. Having that flexibility in your behavior. If something isn't working, do something else. There is no failure. There is just feedback. Now in NLP we have a list of presuppositions, and that was one of them there. We'll be looking again at presuppositions later on in the course. But what I'd like to get over to you is this idea of presuppositions driving everything you do. They're sort of belief systems which are useful to believe. Yeah, so they're belief systems that are useful to believe. There's no dogma in NLP. Okay, and as I say, one of them, and it's driven everything I do, is there is no failure, there's just feedback. If you live your life thinking there's no failure, you've never failed, you don't beat yourself up, and you don't end up falling down a rabbit hole and making a mess of things. Okay, it's just feedback. It didn't work out, do something else. It worked. Brilliant. No failure, just feedback. The third, sensory acuity. What do I mean by that? Okay, sensory, well, that's pretty obvious. The senses, we've got 5 of them. Acuity, being tuned in, finely tuned in. And it's about using all of your senses when you're working with people or groups of people. Now, many of us will simply be, I guess, visual. We see pictures in our heads and get feelings. A few people will get feelings first, then make pictures. Some people will hear things in their head or sounds or what motivated them. It's your job as an NLP therapist or communicator. I think I'll use the word communicator throughout this. It's much better. If you're a communicator working with a person or a group of people, it's your job to switch on your senses and understand that some people in the audience are responding visually, some are responding auditorily, and that's with the ears, they're listening for information, and others are very kinesthetic, i.e. responding only to the feel of things, okay, the speed and rate at which you speak, and the words you use. Again, this is another area we're going to look at when we look at sensory acuity. And there are 2 other senses, of course, that of smell and taste. Smell is olfactory and gustatory is taste. Okay, the vocabulary is useful because, like all disciplines, it'll have its own vocabulary. Martial arts has its own vocabulary, engineering has its own vocabulary, medicine has its own vocabulary, and so does NLP. It allows us to communicate effectively with each other at quite a deep level. So the final one is outcomes. I mentioned that earlier on. If we want to achieve our outcome, we have to have the other 3 legs together. We have to build rapport, we have to have flexibility in our behaviour, and we also have to switch on the senses. And that way we will achieve an outcome. If the outcome isn't the one you desired, what do? You do something else. You're getting it. You're understanding this now. So let's take a quick look at rapport and how we build rapport. I mentioned earlier on about the 5 senses. Okay, this is how we create the map of the world. Another presupposition of NLP there. The map is not the territory. What do I mean by that? Okay, we all share the same territory. okay? But we all have different maps of it in our head. When you first saw me sitting in this room, you will create an idea of what goes on in that room. You may be thinking, ooh, look at all the books. Ooh, look at all the books, what a mess. You may be thinking, ooh, I don't like the colour of that wall. You may be, ooh, I like the colour of that wall. You may be saying, what is he wearing on his t-shirt? I wonder what Bob does in that room. Wouldn't you like to know? Not just YouTube videos. So that's a map. That's how you create your world. It's based on your conditioning from your friends, mentors, teachers, your family, your parents. This is how the map is built up. And it doesn't necessarily link with my map. When I come in this room, I think, ooh, I've got my swords here. That's genuinely what I think, because if I look around, that's exactly what I've got. I've got swords in here. And I don't see clients in here. The room is too small. Okay, so we have preconceptions about things and people. Okay, and you've got to watch that. You've got to be careful with that, because if you start having preconceptions, you start to make assumptions about people. And that old saying, it's a bit cheesy, I know. What's the three letters of the word assumption? Ass. And then you. It makes an ass of you and me. Assume. Okay. So don't assume anything about someone or a group of people when you're communicating with them. Your job as a communicator is to go in there with an open mind, okay? That attitude of curiosity, this is what will drive you. So I've sidetracked a little bit there, but this is the idea here, that we explore ideas in a I guess a random way, but pulling it together through those 4 foundations. So coming back to rapport, we want people to have rapport with us, a group of people or one person. Okay, how do we do that? The first thing we do, we need to switch on our senses, so that when we meet that person for the first time, we start to notice the language that they're using. Are they speaking visually? Are they speaking in an auditory fashion? Or are they purely kinesthetic? We'll leave gustatory and olfactory for a later lesson, because they're quite complex and quite rare. Although I did have a client who once displayed olfactory. Smell was a key motivator for that chap. So let's look at the visual. If we were to call visual, auditory and kinesthetic modalities, which is what the term we use in NLP, modalities, then when a visual person comes to us with a modality of visual, it means they're seeing pictures in their head. And if you watch somebody who's visual, who's predominantly visual, they will use their hands a lot. They will talk very, very quickly. They will talk and use words such as seeing words. So they'll say, I can see where you're coming from. That looks good to me. I've got a clear vision of the future. Show me this. They like to see things, okay? They want to be shown stuff, okay? Now, I would say, in my experience, the number of people I've worked with over the years, 70 to 80% of the people I've met have been visual. But don't make the assumption that the person in front of you is visual, okay? It takes time to work this out. With practice, it happens within the first 20, 30 seconds of talking to them. So visual people will use visual words to describe the world, to describe the map in their head. I was very, very much a visual person when I started. Okay, before I got into NLP in '98, really when I started studying it, I realised very quickly that I spoke a million miles an hour. And this was great for people who were visual. But of course, there was another remainder of my audience who were kinesthetic and auditory, and they just didn't get where I was coming from. So working as a comedian, I started to realise very quickly that in order to get the whole audience on my side, I had to speak visually, auditorily and kinesthetically. But let's just come back to visual, okay? So a visual person will be in front of you, they'll be very animated, they'll be looking up like this. These are called eye accessing cues. Again, it's another lesson. We'll be looking up like this, and they'll be talking in terms of pictures and images, movies, and size, shape, colour, form, yeah, movement. These are all key indicators when we talk visually. These are the sub-modalities of visual. location, size of images, how many images, are they moving, are they still, can you see yourself in the image, or are you looking through your eyes? This is called dissociated and associated, first person, third person. So these things are all important. Location in space is another one. Some people's pictures are in front of them, like that. Others are far away, in the distance. As I said earlier on, some people have got lots of them dotted around. Some have them just there, or there, or there, or there. I used to have a lot of my pictures up on the right, on the top right. And I could see how Bandler worked me out, because I would look off to my right when I was remembering things, to an eye accessing cue. Again, as I've said, we'll come back to that later. So what we've got here fundamentally is a way of exploring someone's map. So let's keep to the visual. So visual people speak quickly, use their hands a lot, and look at their pictures, and use words and language. That is visual. What else do they do? Well, they do something else, and it's quite subtle. They tend to breathe quite high up in the chest. And that's because they're trying to get all the words out, because a picture, as they say, is worth 1,000 words. Yeah, and they want to get all these words out as quickly as possible. Okay, and in order to do that, they have to breathe quite high up in the chest. So you'll notice that they're breathing using the shoulders and the upper chest. That's quite subtle. Okay, so that's another indicator of a visual person. So how does it work with auditory people? How does it work? You couldn't even get the word out then, it's auditory. Well, auditory people tend to speak at this speed and rate, the rate at which people can hear things clearly and therefore get information. Auditory people love information. Give them information. They'll tend to do this with their hands, put it at this level, the level of the ears. They'll tend to go like this. They'll do the telephone position. I don't hear what you're saying. These are words they'll use. I don't hear what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. I hear where you're coming from. Not, I can see what you're on about. I hear what you're going on about. Knock on wood. They love sound. So being clear in your instruction is vitally important when you're communicating with people who are auditory. Okay? They tend to point at their ears. They tend to look to the left and right on a level. They very rarely look up and make pictures. So if we're thinking, and we're generalizing here, if somebody's auditory, that's what they tend, and I'm doing it now as I'm explaining it, because over the years, that's what I've had to do. I've had to move from being visual to auditory to kinesthetic. So think of the auditory words, think of all the words that are auditory that you can think, anything to do with sound, that sounds good to me. I hear what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. Lend an ear. There's many of these, and if you look in the manual, which is provided on the Patreon channel, you'll see that they're all there. There's a nice list, but try and come up with a list yourself. Okay, come up with a list yourself before you look at that list, and you'll realize you'll hear it. And finally, you've got kinesthetic people. Okay, so kinesthetic people tend to take their time speaking. They want to get a feel for what you're on about. They want to get to grips with the ideas and concepts that you've come out with. And they breathe very deep because they're taking their time to get a sense, a feeling of what these words coming out of here actually mean. To a visual person, these people are infuriating because they're not hurrying up. They need to speak quicker. Please speak quicker. You need to speak quicker. Or kinesthetic people cannot understand the map of a visual person. They'll struggle. They'll find it difficult. They will do it, but it will take time. And they never talk in terms of pictures. It's all about accessing feelings. I feel I understand what you're saying is a common phrase they'll use. Getting to grips is an obvious one. It's a physical thing. So again, before you look at that list in the manual, why don't you just come up with some lists of kinesthetic words? You see, I'm even while I'm doing it now, I'm putting myself in that kinesthetic space, because this is really important to be able to do. So that when you're telling a kinesthetic person to relax, you have to speak their language. Now, obviously, people are not clear-cut. They're not visual or auditory or kinesthetic, but they tend to go towards their prominent system in a specific place, area, or context. So people can be very different in different contexts. So you've got to be aware of that. All of this is context related. Okay? So think about the situation, notice the language and the way they're speaking, and that'll give you a link. So how does this help us with rapport? Well, quite easily. If somebody comes to me who's visual, I'm predominantly a visual person anyway, I'm going to be talking visually. So I'm going to keep the speed and rate of my voice going at that speed and rate. And that person will go, oh, that's nice. They're just like me. And people love people who are like us. We all love people who are like us. That's what links us. So if you look around at your friends, particularly friends, and listen to the way they speak and talk and the verbal language they use, you'll find that you have a very similar pattern of language. If you're a visual person, then most of your friends will be very visual. Well, there'll be one or two exceptions. There always is. But that's never failure, is it? It's just feedback. Okay? Just notice that. So that is a fantastic way to build up rapport. Match the system that the person is using. I was about to say that people are not as clear-cut as that, and that's true, because often people will go visual, then they'll get a feeling about it, okay? So they'll be talking very quickly and they may look down temporarily for that kinesthetic moment. That's a little bit more sophisticated, and we're going to look at that later with sensory acuity in terms of eye accessing cues, okay, and actual language patterns, the meta model, and the meta model, which is another key skill. There's many facets to NLP. It's been developing a long time, and it has built up a lot of structures, very powerful structures. And every time something's come along, it's got rid of the old. Okay, but what I'm trying to do on this session is get some of the basics down, things that have stayed fundamental to NLP. Okay, so you've got a kinesthetic person in front of you. What do you do? Well, it should be pretty obvious now. What do you do? Well, you go kinesthetic. And you'll find that that person really will get on with you. Now, that kinesthetic person may occasionally look up to make a picture, but they'll quickly look back down to access feelings. Oh, that reminds me of something. And that's exactly what they'll do. Notice these patterns of behavior in people when you see them. So these are powerful tools for building rapport very quickly. Other obviously ideas in rapport are things like, you may be aware of these, most people are now, body language. We match. If somebody's sitting with arms folded, you copy them and fold your arms. It's called mirroring. It's very crude. It's pretty obvious. Okay, I tend not to use that initially because it's too obvious. But if you're struggling and you notice somebody's crossed their legs, for example, don't cross your legs, cross your arms, cross your hands, but don't cross your eyes, obviously. Okay, so you would part match them. So it's mirroring, but not exactly. So if they cross part of the body, you cross part of your body. If they're open, if they have open leg position, maybe you have an open arm position, but not an open mouth position. And that's just amazement. Okay. And other things such as belief systems. Yeah, so you find people with similar belief systems will all hang around together. So religious people, religions are really good at forming groups of people together because they all have the same beliefs. And God, literally, God help anybody who doesn't match those beliefs, because they become the infidel. Yeah. And that's not good. Okay, and this is why you get dissension between religious groups, because they have different belief systems, and its beliefs are strongly held, and that's dangerous. Beliefs are insidious things and are not fixed. When you were a child, you probably believed, such a thing as Santa Claus existed. Well, they don't. He doesn't. It was a myth, but at the time you really believed it. Yeah, so beliefs can be changed. Political beliefs. People have strong political beliefs until change happens, and then they change their belief systems. Okay, beliefs are insidious, nasty things. Newspapers, the media, books, everybody espouses their own belief system. Okay, always just remember, just have, the only belief you should have is the faith to doubt. Doubt everything, be skeptical. That's what NLP is about. It's about having flexibility. Okay, the flexibility in your beliefs, be able to change your beliefs. Okay, we'll be looking at how you can help people change their beliefs. A lot of beliefs are very limiting. They hold you back. And actually, we talked about the map earlier on. What beliefs can do is narrow the map. So no longer is it a big open map with lots of information. It's a very narrow map. And you'll meet many people who have a narrow window on the world. There's some visual words for you. A very narrow window on the world. So they can't grasp, kinesthetic word there, they can't grasp the ideas that you're coming across with. So language is filled with it. We've already mentioned non-verbal language, body language, that's non-verbal. We've mentioned eye accessing cues, that's non-verbal. Minimal indicators, nodding of the head when people are listening to you, usually means they're getting it. Which brings me on to the auditory thing. Auditory people are very good listeners. And we have to, if we're not good listeners, we have to learn to listen. In communication skills, we call that active listening. Listen, the old thing, you have two of these and one of these. Use your ears, use them and listen to what someone's saying. Don't think about what you're going to say until they've finished, until you've listened, because you can go down a nasty route and lose rapport because of lack of listening. It's something we all need to do. I'm conscious of it. You'll be conscious of it now that I'm bringing it into focus. So, rapport. Okay, there's some fundamental ideas about rapport. What I want you to do after this lesson, okay, it's a short lesson, is go away and just notice the type of language people are using. Okay, notice what they're doing. Are they looking up? Are they looking down? Are they breathing deep like a kinesthetic person? Are they speaking slowly like a kinesthetic person? Are they speaking quickly like a visual person where they want to tell you what's going on in their head because a picture's worth 1,000 words and I've got to get all the words out and I'm breathing high in my chest? Or are they predominantly auditory where they need information as if it's being spouted out of a book, clearly, concisely, put together, and off it goes? All of these things are key for building rapport. This is just the tip of the iceberg. What I want to do is include in the next video more information on flexibility, and let's see where we go with this. Now, I've made this essentially for two of my patrons, and that's Mike Maley, hello there Mr. Patron, and of course Steve Stanton, my mate Steve, both who do sword with me and other martial arts. But of course, this is for all my patrons. And if you want to hop on board with some questions and comments, then put them on the comment section on YouTube. It's a private channel, the HIGHERWAY code. I know I keep saying this, guys, and I sound like a broken record, but please subscribe, please retweet things. Not this video necessarily, but your thoughts and ideas about, what I'm doing. The COVID thing has been a bit of a blessing for me in the sense that this is something I've been meaning to do for years, and business is not my forte, but I'm now having to model business. Okay, I'm having to do that, sadly. And it would be nice to do things for free, but the world's not like that anymore. I have dogs to feed, rabbits to feed, and of course, swords to buy. So please make some comments and reviews on the NLP thing that I'm doing, or indeed any of the videos that I'm doing. And leave your comments below. And because you're patrons, please get in touch with me and let me know what you want. Okay, so I think without further ado, I think we'll finish there today, and we'll do a little bit more work later on. Okay, guys, stay safe, stay indoors, and only go out for shopping. Okay, goodbye.